Hi, I'm Stu Davies, Ocean Caring Digital Strategist. This podcast dives into the real stories behind ocean caring brands and organisations. Welcome to A Drop in the Ocean. Each episode explores the wins, challenges and lived experiences of those working to protect our seas, from grassroots campaigners to global initiatives. But it's more than just those stories. We're also going to connect these change makers with marketing, communications, AI, storytelling and strategy experts to share their insights and help us all amplify our missions. One drop in the ocean becomes many. Let's make some waves together. Welcome to the latest episode of A Drop in the Ocean, and I've got a very, very good friend of mine and a digital expert in her field. It's Helen Olszowska from Seashell Collective, and she's an expert in content marketing and messaging. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about the ocean and also about marketing, because I do like to talk about marketing.
You do. And one of the things I wanted to do with this show is make sure we had a bit of a balance of those people working on the coalface who are working actively in campaigning and communications, but also people who are experts in their field and also have strong connections to the ocean. So I guess you and I fall into that bracket.
Definitely.
So brilliant to have you. And I know you personally as well. So it's super exciting to have you on.
Good to see you.
So I always ambush everybody with a question that I haven't sent to you.
Uh-oh.
At the start of the podcast. And it's this. What's your fondest memory of the ocean? And would you mind sharing that with us?
Oh, not at all. So it's hard to pick a fondest. They're definitely childhood memories, I would say, are the fondest memories. And I think it would be a toss-up between like holidays in France as a child, where I basically used to disappear for the entire day bodyboarding to the point where one of my parents would come marching out, miles along the beach to kind of drag me out again. And just the freedom of being able to spend so long in the ocean is incomparable. And the other one that I'd mention is that I was talking to someone about, staying calm. We live in a busy, stressful world. I run a business. I'm a parent to 2 kids. Life is incredibly hectic. And someone said to me, well, try and think of a time. Just take 2 minutes out. Try and think of a time when you were extremely calm, when you felt your absolute calmest. And the memory that I go to is, again, a family holiday, but being in Corfu and lying, kind of floating on my back in the ocean and looking up at the coastline. Wow. I mean, as a child, I was like, this is the closest to heaven that, I'm going to get.
Saying
I think the ocean does something quite magical to people.
It does. It does.
I'd say those two.
Yeah, I've heard that before. People saying that the ocean is their calm space. It's
Definitely.
the place where the noise stops. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So my next question is, what's your personal connection to the ocean?
I think it's one of those places, oceans wherever in the world that I'm always drawn back to. So I'm not from Brighton originally. I'm from London, and I fully intended when I moved here to move back to London. And I think the ocean was a big factor in me staying. And I've found that, as sometimes happens, one of the good things I've passed on to my children, not all of them are great, is that love of the ocean as well. And taking my kids into the ocean and seeing them experience that similar feeling of calm, I think, but also just sheer joy, is definitely become part of my connection. I feel like it can be a really formative experience to spend a lot of time in the ocean. So it's become increasingly important to me.
And why do ocean issues matter to you personally?
They matter to me because I care about the planet. It's really important that we safeguard this planet that we live on for future generations. And I think that's become even more important to me as a parent. Hearing that there are regular sewage dumps into the ocean around Brighton, it really makes you think, what is the impact of that on the ocean, but what is the impact of that on my family? And is it safe to actually take my children there, or can I take this thing that they love away from them, because it could be dangerous. So yeah, I think there's a lot that I care about related to the ocean that is about legacy, our legacy as a society, and my legacy personally to the future generations of my family.
Yeah, leaving it in a better place than maybe we picked it up.
Absolutely. This
is podcast recording day. I always like to have a swim. Didn't this morning, because it's there's sewage alerts all across the coast because of all the heavy rain. So thank you, Southern Water, for that little gift this morning.
Yeah, I was just looking at the map actually before I came in on Surfs Against Sewage, and it has the kind of different coloured dots, doesn't it? And pretty much all of the south coast was lit up yellow, which means there's been recently a sewage dump. And you know, it's just really disappointing. It's a lovely day in Brighton today, and I was thinking, maybe we could go down after school, and but
yeah. I mean, I'm probably going to go in where I've got my earplugs, and I'll keep my mouth closed, and I'll keep my head above the water, and I'll have a bit of a swim. So, but we shouldn't be here.
No, exactly. We shouldn't have to have that decision-making process.
So Helen, let's just talk a little bit just about what you do. So, in my head, you're a content wizard, content marketing expert, a messaging expert, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, so I think people often, when they think of content, they think primarily of social media, and they think of sort of content production. So actually creating graphics and doing caption writing for social media, but content marketing is really a lot more than that. It's thinking about how well the information that you're putting out on any channel that you have. So it could be social media, it could be email marketing, it could be your written content on your website, it could be live or virtual events that you're running. Any time that you're sort of producing something for your organisation, it's thinking about how well what you're producing meets the needs of your audience and intersects with the goal of your charity or your organisation. I work a lot with charities, so I'll often say charity instead of organisation. Yeah, so it's thinking about that whole piece and how you're taking the audience that you're working with on a journey from people who don't know you at all through to people who would advocate for your organisation and who would stand up and say, well, these guys are the best at doing this, or these are the people who are going to help realise the vision that I've got for the future of the ocean, for example.
There's so much out there of, I guess, marketers and campaigners, and they just jump straight into here's the sell, and they don't maybe think about that journey or as quite well connected with the audience. So when you start working with, say, a values-led brand, and you're trying to help them with these content journeys and these content strategies, where do you begin? How do you even get them started?
I always encourage organisations to start with people. So who are the community that they are trying to serve in some way? And with ocean caring organisations, I think obviously you're trying to care for bodies of water, but actually you're also really trying to care for the communities that use those bodies of waters in different ways, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally. There are so many different connections. So I would always encourage organisations to start with finding the people who they're trying to serve, and then understanding what it is that they need. What do they need to change for within the ocean and or whatever it is that they're working on, and how does that cross over with what the organisation is doing, what its sort of goals and vision are. And I think it's sometimes evident that organisations haven't created their core strategy in collaboration with that community that they're trying to work with, or they've made assumptions there. So sometimes just by talking to that audience and doing some insight research with them, you'll learn that there are differences. Sometimes they're small and sometimes they're more significant in what the audience needs and what the organisation wants. And you need to try and bring those into alignment in your content, but in your sort of strategy more broadly. And I think sometimes we make this very basic mistake of saying what we want to say as an organisation rather than saying what the audience needs to hear. And sometimes the difference is subtle, but it's really critical if you're going to bring people along for the journey with you. So I always kind of start there. And then I'd really encourage organisations to look for stories, because storytelling is such an ancient form of communication, and it's a really great way to connect quickly and quite deeply with your audiences on things that you have shared values and beliefs around. And there will be some amazing stories from the founders of your organisation, from some of the people who already support you perhaps, and how they found out about you, what their experience has been like of working with you. So it's finding those stories and those voices, and almost trying to remove yourself as an organisation as the barrier between the stories of the people that you're caring for and the people that you would like to care for what you do in the future. And I think there are some organisations that do that really effectively. And of course, you've always got to ground these stories in facts and figures.
Yes.
People, once they're kind of emotionally connected about something, it's also really important that they're sort of logically connected to it as well, and they understand, okay, what is the issue? How can we quantify this issue? And what would the numbers look like if things changed for the better? So it's finding those stories, finding those stats, and just being really clear on what your values and beliefs are as an organisation. I think we've seen attitudes change in audiences, particularly as we go down through millennials and Gen Z, that actually the values and beliefs of an organisation is a big factor in whether they would choose to support or buy from that organisation. So I think understanding your audience, and then having those three things really clear, your stories, your stats, and your values and beliefs, is an amazing kind of starting point for your content marketing strategy.
Brilliant advice. And yeah, that really resonates. There's so many organizations and businesses out there, and that framework of the story, there's a hero, and the hero isn't you or your organization, it's your customer or your audience. And as soon as you make that pivot and then realize that you're the guide, you can start doing really great things. Definitely.
And yeah, there are some organizations that do that really well, and their content is almost always consistently stories led. So one of the clients that I work with doing community management is Great Ormond Street Hospital and Children's Charity, and their social media on the sort of charity side is consistently led by the stories of the children and families that they care for, and the organisation takes a back seat. Their role is evident, but exactly as you say, they're the guide in the sometimes tremendously difficult journeys that these children and families go through.
Okay, yeah. I think some organisations can get a little bit stuck with what they've always done. Especially, I was working with an organisation recently, and they were saying, well, we need to reach younger people. How can we reach younger people? The social media team were doing a good job, but they were only were reaching a certain demographic. So my suggestion was, well, why don't you get a couple of uni kids to sit on your content strategy board and help some ideas, and they'll actually tell you where the kids are posting and what's going to work. And you've got to go to your audience and invite them into what you're doing. Definitely. And audiences are so keen to feel part of an organisation. I think I was looking up some stats, because I do love a stat, and it was something like, I think 88% of people are more likely to get involved with a brand if they feel like they can be part of it, which is incredible. Really vital, I think, and increasingly vital as you go through to younger and younger audiences, because we have these less transactional relationships with the communities that we work with. And it's really fascinating that actually one of the reasons, particularly with values-led organisations, that people want to engage with the organisation is, yes, of course, the work, but also to find connection. So I've done some work with another hospital charity, actually, the Royal Marsden, and they found, when they looked into who was actually following them on social media to try and develop user personas, that the primary reason that people were coming to them was to find connection. And they can see that through that stories-led approach. They can see other patients and families that are
going through similar experiences to them, and they'll find other people who are similar to them in the comments section. So I think the role of community as well, and also, as you say, like, inviting someone into your board, that sort of co-production approach to strategy creation, to content creation is really important.
Yeah. And you've just pulled out a really brilliant example of strategy is good diagnosis equals good strategy. By diagnosing your social media followers, it's transformed your view of potentially how you outreach to certain groups and what content goes out.
Definitely, absolutely. It's always got to be the start point for me.
So how do you then help those organisations find their voice or shape their narrative once you've kind of done those kind of beginning strategic steps?
So I think that's really sort of what we were talking about before, thinking particularly about those three things, about stories, about the stats, about the beliefs and values that they hold. And I think it's not just knowing what they are, but it's knowing how you're going to communicate them in a way that connects with that particular audience. So just posting on social media or sending out in an email your mission statement or your list of values is not going to do it. How do you put up a statement, a value statement, for example, that might really align with a belief that your audience holds? So it's got to be a bit more specific. The language needs to be accessible, and it needs to be, I think, in a values-led organisation, emotively connected in some way. Yeah. So it's not as straightforward as just thinking, well, we already know this, let's just get that out there. And I think with stories as well, I find with a lot of organisations, totally understandably, particularly with values-led organisations, because they tend to be time and resource poor, but they don't have a stories pipeline, which, sounds like a very technical term for something that's very personal, but you need to be having processes in place that will help you find people who will advocate for your organisation alongside you. And maybe you're kind of personally connecting with these people, but you're not taking that next step to ask if they'd be willing to share their story. And you don't have that option on your websites where people can just share their story or give their opinion on something. You're not following up when people say something in your comments section on social media to say, actually, would it be all right if we were to have a conversation and maybe share that opinion that you've put here more publicly on some of our other channels? I think it's about the processes that back up being able to find all of those things that you need,
and how you capture the stories that are available for the marketing team.
Absolutely.
Somebody in campaigning might have a story. Where do they put it? That someone on the social media side can actually go in and put that. And systems are important.
They are important. And when you're talking about this world where we have such a huge proliferation of content, you need to be thinking about having a multimedia approach to those stories as well, because sometimes people say, oh, well, yeah, I've got these 3 lines from someone that I spoke to about this issue, but you haven't got their photograph and you haven't got a video of them, and you perhaps haven't got any information about who they are and why they care about this. So it's getting a sort of a really well-rounded view of what this particular story is, so that it can be adapted for different channels, because the way you'll present that story on an email or on social media or in a blog is going to be very different, and you'll need different things.
And that segues us nicely into channels and tactics. And as you said, a lot of ocean caring organisations have limited time, small resources. What would you say is working well in content marketing right now for small mission-driven teams? What if you're going to focus on this, focus on one thing or focus on one or two things, try and get this right. What would your advice be?
So I think if you've got limited resource, I would always say do less well. Not less well, but do less, well.
I would find out rubbish out.
Yeah, exactly.
Helen said do it.
That'll be fine. No, to really, particularly in social media, I hear people saying, well, we're across all of these, we're across 8 platforms, and, and we put the sort of same content out, but it's really hard to come up with the content and things. I think thinking about where are your audiences, and being in those places with them and creating content for them really well is great. I think in terms of particular techniques that are working right now, you know, we're in a really difficult time for a lot of people. It's an incredibly difficult picture globally. Economically, it's very, very difficult in many places, including the UK. And I think people are reticent to make decisions because they're not sure what the future looks like, and it's a very real sense of I'm not really certain about what the next 6 months will be like, what the next year will be like. So I've noticed that actually kind of what I'd call like the slow burn techniques for connection are working much better now. So things like kind of hand raiser campaign. So I'm talking about kind of, you know, what we'd call the top of the funnel. Yeah. So people who don't know you at all, and they're going to see something that you put out and think, oh yeah, actually I'm interested in finding out more. Okay. And so a hand raiser technique could be something like, a value statement saying, you know, we believe this, and if you do too, then sign this petition, for example, or, you know, give us your name, sign up to be part of this movement. It could be something like, we've got this particular information because we're experts in this area, and you can access it if you share your details with us, that sort of thing. And so it's using that lead-led approach. And once someone has, you know, downloaded your report or whatever it is, or signed up to be part of your movement, then they go into an automated email journey. So you're not necessarily asking them to do the thing you really want to do straight away. You're taking that kind of slow burn approach. So you might take them on an email journey that lasts several weeks, or it might even last several months. You know, maybe they actually do something in the email journey. I've just worked with a cancer prevention organisation who have several email journeys that take you on a kind of fitness and nutrition journey for 2 to 3 months. So it might be something like that, for example. But by the time you reach the end of this journey, you're potentially thinking and feeling differently about the organisation than you were at the beginning. I think, yes, people are responding to like emergency appeals. And obviously I'm thinking a lot in a kind of fundraising context here, because I did fundraising for a long time. But I think people are increasingly responding to these sort of slow burn, long-term relationship building campaigns. Okay. And actually, in terms of fundraising, I'm just writing an article, so I do some freelance writing as well. I'm just writing an article on this at the moment. There's a big opportunity for charities with legacy giving, because one thing that is happening right now, it's just starting to happen, is a massive intergenerational wealth transfer. And there's an opportunity for charities to be in the right position so that people are aware of them and would consider maybe leaving a legacy in their will. And that is really a kind of people buying into the vision that your organisation has for the future. And it's a long-term sustainable funding mechanism, but it is really about your own legacy as a person and how you would like to see the world changing when you're no longer here. So there is a big opportunity there. But again, that is all about having these long-term relationships with people. It's not about this short transactional approach. That will still happen in some sectors. But if we're talking about values and we're talking about real change, real sustainable change for the future, we have to be thinking long-term. It's never been a short-term game. So we need to have people along for that full journey. And that's what we're talking about in content marketing all the time. We're talking about someone getting to know your organisation, caring about your organisation, and remaining a sort of supporter, a collaborator, an advocate for you across their lifetime. And that's really what we should be thinking about. But in terms of the techniques, I think this starting with that approach is working really well.
And it's how you map out the customer journey, getting them into that top of the funnel, and then how you then market to them later.
Absolutely.
With stories.
With stories, with stats, with values, I think. And it's also about not forgetting about people, about once they've done the thing you want them to do. So maybe you want them to make a donation, maybe you want them to buy something from you, whatever it is that's your biggest kind of calls to action. Sometimes people do that and then they go into this, oh, well, they're now customers or they're now supporters. So what we do to them is we just keep selling to them. But you need to also keep selling the future and the long-term change that you want to see, and they need to feel that they're part of it. They need to feel that they're not just, someone that you go to when you need some cash, and you're not just selling to them. You're making them part of your vision. Okay.
One final question before we just take a short break. So we talked about social media and its role in helping getting our messaging out there. It can feel very overwhelming, and where do you start? So any advice for campaigners and marketers, anyone listening, how to stay focused?
Definitely. I will always go back to, and I may sound like a broken record on this, but get to know who your audiences are. And because the social media platforms are not telling you. They used to tell you a lot more than they did. And gradually the demographic data just gets whittled away until you get something very basic. It doesn't really tell you about who's following you. It doesn't tell you about who you're reaching, that you're who isn't following you. It doesn't tell you what they care about. It doesn't tell you what they need from you. It doesn't tell you what they think about the content you're putting out. And all of that stuff is pretty easy to find. Speak to a representative 5 people who follow you, and you'll learn more in those 5 half-an-hour conversations than you will by trawling through a year's worth of reports, sitting at your desk wondering what those stats really mean when you get down to it. And I think the critical questions to ask as well when you're having those conversations is about behaviour, because people might use lots of social media platforms, but they might only go on to one of them like once a month, for example, and they might only go on to see what their grandchildren are up to or to check in with old business colleagues. That might not be enough time for them to be following an organisation and developing a sort of consistent relationship. So go to the platforms where they are in the right mindset to connect with you. If you're not related to their sort of professional work, they may just ignore you when they're on LinkedIn to specifically find out what so-and-so they worked with 10 years ago is up to for 5 minutes and then not look at it again for a month. Think about where they are and when they're in the right context to hear from you. And as I said before, do less, well. I should hit the. Can I hit the laughter button now? No, that's the best marketing joke I've got. But if you can, I think I love it when I go onto an organisation's website and I see that they've just got one social platform. I always think that is really smart. That's really switched on. They clearly know who their audience is, where they're hanging out, and where the right place to connect with them, and then they have the opportunity to do it really well.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with you very shortly.
You're listening to A Drop in the Ocean, the podcast that brings together ocean changemakers and digital communications experts, helping us all amplify our impact. If you've got a story to tell, or you're a digital communications expert who loves the ocean, then I would love to hear from you all. Get in touch with me on stu-davies.com. Let's all amplify our impact.
Welcome back. I've got my amazing guest here, Helen, who is content marketing and messaging expert. So, Helen, we talked a bit about content strategy and tactics. And we also touched upon tools and processes, which is an extremely important bedrock of kind of any marketing. But do you think there are any tools, systems, processes that have helped you or your clients stay consistent?
Yeah, so one of the things I always advocate for in content marketing strategies is having a really good bank of evergreen content, whether across any channel. It's particularly difficult to do on social media because of the volume of content that you have to put out. So I've, in fact, worked with you on a project, Stu, where we use this technique to develop a bank of evergreen content, meaning that it could go out at any time and still be relevant because it relates pretty strongly to the core needs of the organisation. And I try to, in evergreen content banks, also think about content with a different purpose, because regardless of which channel you're on, you are sometimes trying to attract people to the organisation for the first time. You're sometimes trying to engage them with your ongoing work or ongoing the issue that you're working on, or you're trying to get them to actually do something, to actually take action on something. So I try to, in evergreen content banks, have a mix of all three of those types of content with those different purposes. And one of the tools that I recommend organisations use is Smarter Queue, because you can set up a queuing system where you put all of this content in and it will put it out, go to the bottom of the queue and then start again. So what it means for organisations with limited resources is that, say you want to post 3 times a week on a particular social media platform, perhaps 1 or 2 of those could come from your content queue, and then you're still leaving space to be reactive as well to things that are happening in the news and take advantage of those conversations that are happening in society around the issue that you work on and produce content around that. But you get that balance, and with the evergreen content queue, it doesn't have to just remain static. You can add to it. So while you might do a lot of work on it up front to set the queue up, then you can just keep adding to it as you go, and you eventually extend out the run time of it. So it might run for 3 to 6 months before you ever get back to the start of it again. And sometimes organisations worry that using a content queue isn't going to be great because their most committed members of their audience will see that content again and again. But we know as marketers that it's probably only about 10%.
10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
gone. Exactly. It's about 10% of your audience that will probably see it, and they might not read it. They might just glance at it. So actually, if you show it to them a few times, then maybe one of those times they'll properly read and engage with it. But you're showing it to them a few times, once every few weeks. So the chances of someone realising that you even have a content queue going are really small. And from an internal perspective, it could save you a huge amount of time.
Yeah, I think that's such brilliant advice. Don't be afraid to recycle the messaging which is still relevant. And also, it's very good practice for digital sustainability. You're recycling your content.
Definitely. And actually another tool that I wanted to mention, because obviously we are all about sustainability on this podcast, is EcoSend, which is, have you come across them?
No, I haven't. No.
So they're a carbon-friendly email marketing tool. Because email marketing, I think, is going to become increasingly important. I've seen a lot more requests for work on email projects coming into me, because people are thinking, well, in this time when it's increasingly difficult and more expensive to attract new audiences, are we actually making the most of our existing audiences who are there on our databases? And 9 times out of 10 we have an email address for. So can we really think about how we're communicating with those audiences and really start to get down into the detail of, well, who needs to receive what type of email? Can we even use techniques to vary the content within each email? Can we do A/B testing on the title so we can improve our the subject, so that we can improve our open rates? Can we look at dynamic content within the email so that if we know someone's particularly interested in one area of our work, we just show that content to them, and in that way really make those emails that our audience really want to receive and increase that engagement? Because actually a lot of the time people come into an organisation, they may do 1 or 2 things that they had perhaps planned to do, and then they are just not engaged in a way that keeps them involved. So they kind of drop off. And when you've got people who are not opening and clicking your emails in your audience, they're going to affect your deliverability.
Yeah.
So you really have to think about how to keep that audience engaged, and also how to, and it's hard to do, how to, like, it's not actually hard, it's technically very easy, but it feels hard to let go of people who aren't engaging with you anymore, but they are dragging you back. They're holding you back. Let them go. It's good. Don't think about the numbers. Think about who's really caring about what you do.
It's a vanity metric.
It is a vanity metric, but it is hard. It is hard. So yeah, I think tools like EcoSend, if you're upping the amount that you're emailing or thinking about how to make your program more sophisticated and more personal, to increase that engagement, then using a tool like EcoSend that's better in terms of churning through less carbon is going to be a great thing.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And so one of the things I'm very big on, and I do a lot in my strategy consultations, is planning. I'm often going into a client, an organization, and it's, okay, have you actually planned what it is you're going to focus on and when, and what resources are required from the marketing teams? Well, no, not really. We're doing too many different things, and it feels very reactive. How do you advise that? But also, marketing also needs to be reactive.
Yes,
things will happen. How do you advise, say, clients to approach that kind of structured planning to work out when you're going to do things, versus reacting in say, using a content calendar or a content plan?
Definitely. I mean, I'm a big advocate for the content calendar, but also in really good communication around that content calendar. I think it should be, I mean, it depends on the size of your organisation. Sometimes you've got one person doing all of your content across different channels. But as soon as you have more than one person, it's easy for things to be missed and the content not to feel connected. And as soon as audiences feel that disconnect, or they get a slight kind of jarring feeling when they skip from one channel to the other, because they skip around all over the place and not necessarily in the order you want them to, then you've got an issue. So I think thinking about evergreen content is really important. And one of the things around evergreen content as well is not just these sort of consistent messages that always make sense for your audience, is thinking about seasonality as well. And that might be particularly relevant to ocean carrying organisations, because communities may engage with the ocean more in the summer than they do at other times of the year, depending on what the role of the ocean in their lives is.
Not the surface.
Yeah, not the surface. The surface are always there, but there's definitely fair weather ocean swimmers. I can definitely attest to that in Brighton.
I'm biased.
But yeah, exactly. I know. I think thinking about seasonality is really important as well. So you can plan campaigns. You may have various, and you find this a lot in values-led organisations, there are lots of different things that the organisation wants their audiences to be doing, and sometimes they're vying for attention on the content calendar. So thinking about specific campaign periods where you really have a sprint on that particular call to action, whether that's kind of you're overt about that to your audience or you're not, you may just have kind of 6 weeks where you focus on a particular campaign. I think that's really critical, but leaving space for reactive content is so vital as well, because it needs to feel that your organisation is aware of what's happening now and can respond in a timely manner. So recently there was a news story that was headline news, and a client that I work with running their LinkedIn company page, it was relevant to them. So I bumped the existing content from the plan and put out something reactive related to that news story. And because I'd made that one change, which it probably took me about 10 minutes to put together that piece of content, that month, the page got over 60,000 impressions for the first time in a year. And it wasn't just from that piece of content, because what you've got to remember is that with reactive content, sometimes it will fly, sometimes it will fall, but you've got the chance that it will fly. And if it does, you don't just get the results from that piece of content, because algorithms on social media will then show your content to those audiences, existing or new, that have engaged with this, piece of content that's really flown and really landed, and so you're more likely to get them to the stage where they're a follower and they're going to engage with you more consistently. So I think having that balance is really important, and having good communication around your content calendar and all the people who are involved in input in it is really vital. So having regular planning meetings, conversations so you can think about how you can be coordinated and integrated across your different channels, but also having, I find, like, quicker messaging services, whether it's Slack, whether it's WhatsApp, whatever, having the ability to be able to talk quickly if something happens and gets into the headlines, so you can be one of the first organisations that's actually putting something out, and you're not just putting it out on one channel, you're putting it out across multiple channels. If you have the ability to be able to talk about something quickly and make decisions quickly, then that's going to really serve you well. And I'm going to make a point about decision making, because approvals processes in content, we've got to talk about it. We just have to. We have to.
Do we really?
We do have to talk about it. And I'm just going to say, approvals processes should relate so strongly to expertise. If someone is signing something off, it's because they're an expert in something related to it. So if there is within the content something that involves a professional expertise that the content creator doesn't have, then it should be signed off by that professional. If someone has perhaps copy editing expertise and they need to sign something, they then have the expertise to sign something off, that's great, have them in your approvals process. But content, whatever it is, social media, blogs, email marketing, it should not be going through like a 10-stage approval process with people who do not have expertise on either the content or the style that it's been created in. And that slows you down, and that stops you having those magical months where your content really flies because you were able to react quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if we'd been recording this, you would have seen me rolling my eyes, because both Helen and I have probably had a lot of experience within this. But it's really important, because if the experts aren't signing it off, it's subjective opinion, and it's just passing it around subjective opinion. And one of the things that you can do is you can give the boundaries of pre-approval. If it's not something that needs an expert on water quality, say, to just go through the numbers, it's part of your, what you call your evergreen mission statement, that should all be pre-approved, and you just kind of roll with it. And then you've got those that flexibility in the process. But yeah, absolutely brilliant point. You can really just treacle the whole thing down. It's important to be reactive in today's world. So any recent campaigns or content that you've been a part of that you felt really landed well that we can share with the audience? Content that I've been a part of, let's think about this. So, I've been working on I talked a little bit about working with the cancer prevention charity, so World Cancer Research Fund, on their email marketing program. So it was a bit like giving it a spring clean. So we've been in and looked at their welcome journey. So people are brought into the organisation in a way that really connects them with the people behind the brand. So each of those emails is now from a member of staff with a slightly different area of expertise. One of them even is someone that you would contact if you wanted more information or you had a problem. So people feel that they've got a face to go to. They know who's on the other end of the email or the phone if they call. We've also looked at their re-engagement strategy for them. So that we were talking about before. So getting people to get engaged with the email content again by clicking on it, so putting out some of their best content to try and re-engage that audience, but also then sunsetting and unsubscribing people who are not engaging with the content anymore. And in doing that, we've seen their click rate on their regular health information newsletter increase by 15% already. And we've only just sort of started this work. So that's huge, and that is going to indicate to the internet service providers that this is a legitimate organisation. Their emails should be reaching inboxes and not going to spam folders, and it means that they know that the content they're creating is really connecting with the audiences. Yes. And part of that work was talking to those audiences. And one of the times that I found incredibly moving and
which is testament to why we need to show the same care to our audiences as they show for us as organisations, is that, we put out this call for insight interviews, and a lady came along who had stage 4 terminal cancer, very unwell, but she wanted to come on this call to talk about what the health information she'd received from this organisation meant to her. Even though it was not going to change her outcomes, she wanted to have a voice and she wanted to be heard about what this had meant for her and what she wanted to see happening differently, because that's part of her legacy. And how incredibly moving that someone would take the time out of their day when they have limited time left to come and talk about that. And it really sort of reminded me how important it is for us to show the care to our audiences that they show for us.
Brilliant. So we've come to the end of the podcast, sadly, but I do have one kind of final question for you, Helen. So if our audience is going to take one thing away from your expertise, a small but mighty action, what could they take this week to help improve their content communications?
I think you probably already know what I'm going to say, but it's talk to your people.
Talk to your people.
Talk to your people. However it is, whether you just decide to randomly pick up the phone to someone who is involved with your organisation, to just say thank you for being involved and just find out how they're doing and what their current thinking is about the issues you work on, or whether you do something more formal to try and learn about an audience on a particular channel. Honestly, although it feels like another thing to do and you kind of know a lot of it already, there's gold dust in those conversations, and it's absolutely worth your time. And you see in the commercial sector that organisations who prioritise insight research have far better kind of outcomes commercially. They have better turnovers. And I almost think it's even more critical in values-led organisations that we understand the audiences that we're serving so well that everything we do is meeting what they need.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Helen, thank you so much for being on, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to A Drop in the Ocean, the podcast that brings together ocean changemakers and digital communications experts, helping us all amplify our impact. New episodes will be available from your streaming platform of choice. Please do like, comment and share and help us spread the message. See you next time.